Welcome, residents, to the Dr. DC podcast. My name is producer Richard, and across from me is the doctor himself. Santa Claus?
Yeah, because it's spooky times.
Boy, that's not Santa Claus.
Isn't it?
No.
Are you sure?
Ching, 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 ching.
Easy. Easy.
Guang! Here comes Halloween. Here comes
there we go,
Halloween.
yeah.
Best time of the year.
It's October.
Here comes Halloween. Here comes Halloween. I want to do something.
Nice.
Forgot what the first word I said was, so I cannot rhyme. But the song is almost over, so I bet it's time.
Wow.
Yeah.
You would have been great on Whose Line Is It Anymore? Yeah. Do a hoedown.
Well, no. I prefer the Irish jigs.
Sure.
Oh
man.
Classic.
Great.
Each week we talk about the weird and wonderful world of DC while fielding questions from listeners like you.
And it is, in fact, still October. Ho, ho, ho.
Happy Halloween!
And we are talking about another spooky topic this week.
Oh, that's right. We're talking about New York City.
Yeah, New York City.
Did I send you that?
Most devious bastard.
Did I send you that TikTok about it was like him on a different TV show?
Oh, yeah.
Where he just keeps smashing things.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we are talking about
What we do in the shadows.
what some do in the shadows, at least.
Yes, the shadows themselves.
Shadow people.
Yeah.
Shadow powers.
Darkness.
Shadow tech, shadow people, all of them.
The dark abilities.
Yes, that's right.
The darkness.
Yeah. Do you remember? This is such a tangent. Do you remember the song "In the Shadows" by the Rasmus?
No, sing it.
Such a stupid fucking like emo kind of pop song.
How does it go?
I can't.
If the Rasmus were here right now.
Yeah, or if they in the room with us right now. Yeah. It's just like a very dumb, like angsty pop song.
Sure, yeah.
But leading up to this episode, because I've just been seeing the word shadow all the time, it's been like in my head.
Oh, I don't think I've even heard that group.
It's not good. Like it's shitty. It's like bad pop. It's not like a cool emo track you haven't heard.
Sure,
it's like
yeah.
shitty like pop emo kind of shit.
Not good.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the shadows.
Yeah, let's
get
do it,
into
baby.
the shadows.
Umbra Kinesis. Shadow powers, baby.
Does it show up a lot? We're about to find out. Starting by Facebook.
Going to the face in the book, going to the Facebook.
From the most interesting resident.
It's Stephen Marion Almagro.
Of course, that's what else could it be?
Oh, yes.
Who asks, Shade was a regular villain in the JLU cartoons. Why is he not used as much in comics?
I mean, he wasn't used a ton on JLU. You saw him a few times. Why is he not used as much in comics? I'd say compared to other villains of his era, he's used more than most. He's from like the 40s.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Shade goes back a long way, or a version of the Shade goes back a long way. But then the Shade was a big part of Starman, the James Robinson Starman series. Shade was a big part of that. Shade crops up in Flash comics every once in a while. Shade was in the Rebirth era Flash comic. Shade pops up from time to time. You're right. He's not like the Joker or something. Like he's not showing up a lot, but I mean, compared to what were some of his contemporaries, like the Fiddler and shit like that, like
Sure.
the Gambler, like the Shade shows up a decent amount. You know, he showed up in. Pretty sure he showed up in like the JSA comic. He showed up in he might have shown up in Infinity Inc. He comes up from time to time. He's got pretty powerful shadow abilities, and he's sort of a living shadow of a sort. And he's got that kind of like, he was from like the late 1800s, so he has that kind of like Victorian like gentleman, like top hat cane
Sure.
kind of look to him. And yeah, I don't think there's like a reason he doesn't show up other than maybe now. I mean, he did show up in a Flash comic, so what I'm about to say doesn't make a ton of sense, but like other than he's sort of been claimed by a slightly more literary element of DC Comics, being in that Starman series, and then he had a spin-off series. I think of that. He may have also shown up in Sandman at some point. Sure. But like those are books that have like even though they're right in the DC universe, they're connected, they're part of it, they're not often their own thing. There's a sort of elevated kind of literary quality to them.
Yeah.
And I think that does mean maybe people are less inclined to include those characters, than in something else. That's not like a hard and fast thing. That's just pure speculation. But like I said, he does show up in Rebirth era Flash, which is not that long ago. So he's like in the last 5 years, the Shade has been in comics.
He's also not the only like character that can use those abilities. So
yeah, well, exactly. There's other characters with shadow powers, like Nightshade showed up in in the Deathstroke series before Deathstroke Inc. Nightshade was in there. Obsidian has been around a bit more since Doomsday Clock happened. And, like the Alan Scott was back in the timeline, so Obsidian's been around a little bit more, like not a ton, but a little bit. So yeah, these characters, like there are other characters that could do like shadow things that are slightly more available and more present. But yeah,
let's leave Facebook and head over to Blue Sky.
Oh no, fuck! I forgot
there
what we
goes Mr. Blue
Sky,
who first has only one question
Sure.
from Alex Jaffe.
Sure.
Who asks, what do we know about the Shadowlands?
So the Shadowlands are like an extra-dimensional realm. They're technically in the sphere of the gods. Any place that's sort of like more of a physical manifestation of an idea is usually in the sphere of the gods, as opposed to being like an actual physical place like a universe. So the Shadowlands are like that. So Nightshade, it's also called the Land of Nightshades. Nightshade is part of that. Shadow Thief can move in and out of the Shadow Realm. Shade moves in and out of the Shadow Realm. Like that is the location. Obsidian spent a lot of time living in the Shadow Realm, going in and out of it. So that is like it's where shadows manifest magically and as a realm. So it is a place. You can teleport between worlds of the multiverse by going through it, which is consistent with it being in the sphere of the gods. It's a multiversal kind of place, which means you could enter it in one universe and exit it in a different one.
Sure.
And that's been like the Shade did that in the Silver Age. He was like robbing Earth 1, and Barry eventually clued in that it was a multiverse thing, and he got Jay to help him stop the Shade. You could do shit like that in there. It's the source of their power, and it's also where shadows manifest physically. So, Hawkman and the Shade, actually, speaking of the Shade showing up in more modern comics, Hawkman and the Shade, during Year of the Villain, which was the lead up to Death Metal, they go to the Shadow Realm to fight a sort of souped up Shadow Thief. Whose tech got better and he was sort of taking over. But they go there because in the real world, trying to fight shadows is fucking impossible. But in the Shadow Realm, shadows manifest physically, so they can actually fight them. So they go into the shadow. It might be the place of power for someone with shadow powers or shadow abilities, but at least you can have some impact on it there. So again, that's another example of the Shade showing up. They both go into the Shadow Realm to do that. There's a psychic element to the Shadowlands too, though, which is that they will kind of reflect or get like twisted by the psyches of the most powerful people in there. So if you are very powerful, Umbra Kinetic or whatever, and you are in the Shadowlands and you have a lot of negative emotions or a lot of fears or whatever, those things will start to manifest. It'll start to turn the Shadowlands into kind of like a slight nightmare kind of place, or like a place of with more kind of predatory shadow creatures or things like that.
Like Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, I mean, kind of. Yeah, I mean, there's a psychic element to it, right? Like theoretically, if everyone that was a powerful shadow power user was in the Shadowlands and they were all super happy, the Shadowlands would be a very chill place.
Totally.
But because there's always this thing with there's always a sort of blend between darkness and your fears and things like that. There's always an element of it becoming a reinforcing thing where it, like, if you come in with a negative emotion, it'll double it down.
Sure.
And manifest it back as something physical. So the Shadowlands respond psychically to things, but yeah, it's essentially where all shadow powers come from, and where shadows are an actual kind of like distinct form of being or thing. Yeah.
Totally. All right, let's leave Blue Sky, head on over to Instagram.
Now we're going to Instagram, take some questions and answer them. Nice. Slurped it right up. That was good.
Like delicious soup.
Easy.
First question. That D the Geek asks, read an issue of The Flash, or read an issue
Nice.
of The Flash where Wally was trapped in obsidian darkness and saw his own fear there. Is that part of his power? That's the oldest I've read of him, but I thought he just made things super dark.
So Obsidian, Todd Rice, he's the son of Alan Scott, the Golden Age Green Lantern. He has a twin, Jenny Lynn Hayden, who is Jade. Now, Jade inherited Starheart powers from Alan. So she has like the green energy. And then she was also in the Green Lantern Corps for a bit, but she has those powers. But Todd didn't get those powers. Todd got shadow powers, which were like a residual thing in Alan from years of fighting this villain called Ian Karkull, who had kind of darkness abilities and things like that, and sort of magic related. So Todd got those powers. Todd has he's a very, very powerful magic adjacent character. His abilities are all shadow abilities. He's umbra-kinetic, but part of that is he actually, one of his abilities kind of is about like the inner darkness. He can kind of, has a sort of quasi-psychic thing that he can tap into fears, start manifesting those. The darkness he produces can amplify those and manifest those. So it is a little bit a power of Todd's, but there is also, in a broader sense, shadows and fears have a sort of hazy border where any of those powers could become a thing. You know, if we ever talk about Eclipso, right? Eclipso, you know, his power is more about the internal darkness, but what are his literal weaknesses? It's like sunlight. He has to come out at nighttime.
Sure,
like, you know, like there's a long-standing history of making a metaphorical connection between literal darkness and kind of internal emotional darkness. So how concrete you make those things varies from character to character, but Todd actually does kind of have an ability to do that. That's like part of his powers. But not a totally crazy off the wall thing for someone that is already manipulating darkness and shadow and stuff like that. Yeah. Did I answer that question? Did I do it? I forgot what the whole question was.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you did.
Next
Next
I'm
question.
really good at this.
Yeah, great at it.
402 episodes, baby.
Did I do it?
Is this good?
Next question. Keegan,
Cut out me being unconfident.
I mean, we wouldn't have a podcast to put out.
Oh, no.
Keegan
You're
Steedman.
fucking right. I'm so stupid.
Keegan St. Edman? He's capitalized the S and T now, and I'm confused.
I don't mistype.
Keegan Steven asks, just copy. All right. Obsidian versus a yoked out Mirror Master. Who do you have? Shadow Realm versus Mirror Realm.
Interesting. I'm not sure how yoking Mirror Master out helps.
more
His
mirrory.
powers are so non-physical
Yeah.
that I'm not really sure how that helps him.
More mirror aware ability.
I like the general idea because Mirror Master's power, there
one's
is a
reflective, one's like taking away.
and they conflate Mirror Master's powers also with having like light things, like projecting holograms and stuff like that. Like there is a mirror dimension, as mentioned in this question.
yeah,
That's totally a thing. Light is a great counter to darkness. The thing with Mirror Master, though, if we wanted to be really pedantic about it, is that it's his about reflections, and theoretically, in a totally dark room, there are none.
Yeah.
That's like there kind of needs light is sort of like a passive thing that needs to be present for the Mirror Master to like use that at all.
Yeah.
So I'm tempted to give it to Shadow just on that. But also, like, on capability of the characters, Obsidian is, like, an extremely powerful, very capable, lived in the Shadowlands for years
Sure.
character. Mirror Master is a crook.
Sure.
Like, the Sam Scudder, the original one, is a relatively competent one, but still basically just a crook, one of the rogues. And then the other one, Evan McCullough, was like a drug addict and shit like that. He was like a fucking mess. Neither of them, I don't think, have the... And like Mirror Master, unlike Captain Cold, I think doesn't strike... Like, he doesn't strike me as one of those ones that's like... he has the sort of like inner determination to like keep going against a very difficult meta foe. Like, Captain Cold kind of has that. Mirror Master, I go like... you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't even think like character-wise, that's a really... Like, I think it's a pretty lopsided matchup for me.
Yeah, I mean, you can't... Yeah, Mirror Master can't fight without light, so...
Essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, reflection is light.
If we're talking about the dimensions, I mean, both are equally unpowerful in the other's dimension.
Sure.
Like, it's great. If you could trap Obsidian in the mirror dimension, it's hard to get out of that.
Yeah.
Like that. But Obsidian also is like, because shadow powers are magic powers, he's a magic user. The mirror dimension's just a dimension. You could probably figure it out.
Yeah.
But for Mirror Master to get trapped in the Shadowlands and not have a mirror way out is extremely difficult.
So it's going to Obsidian.
I think so. In almost every conceivable way, I think.
Yeah. If you can think of one that is not, let us know.
Yeah.
Leaving Instagram and now heading over to Reddit,
where everyone's nice and no one's ever mean.
First question from Rick to the E, who asks, what do you think about the lore on shadows being weakened or hurt by light? In reality, shadows require light. Otherwise, it's all darkness. It's also, what's the difference between darkness and a shadow? Like, because I think, like, in the course of, like, shade, maybe, or, like, you know what I mean? Like, then maybe it's, like, you need shadow. But a lot of these are dark powers.
I think we conflate the terms in terms of talking about the powers. Shadow powers, darkness powers. They're basically the same thing, but we're talking about manipulating darkness. But when you're describing in real life a shadow, you're right in saying that that's relative.
Yeah.
There's an area of light, and then there's a darker area where the light isn't reaching, and that is a shadow. But darkness does not need light to exist.
Yeah.
Because darkness is an absence.
Sense of light, yeah.
And so it actually doesn't need that balance. However, there's like a cosmological thing in DC where they talk about exactly this idea.
Yeah.
It's tangentially connected to shadow powers. So the Great Darkness.
Yes.
Which we've heard of in a bunch of different areas and realms, including, most recently, Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths. The Great Darkness is darkness. It was the beginning. It's nothing.
Yeah.
It's nothingness, but it has a consciousness. You know what I mean? So the supreme irony of being nothing with a consciousness, but that's what it is. And it, in Swamp Thing like 50, which is right around Crisis on Infinite Earths, the first Crisis, the magic users are trying to repel the great darkness from taking over and destroying everything. Some magic characters side with the darkness, and some do not, and they fight against it. This is the story where Giovanni Zatara dies. It's the story that sees like Etrigan and a bunch of like forces in hell trying to fight the darkness, and ultimately, it's Swamp Thing, I think, which makes sense. It's in Swamp Thing's book. It's Swamp Thing that makes a plea to the Great Darkness about. He doesn't believe in. Everyone believes that the darkness is evil. It's the Great Darkness. It must be the root of evil. Swamp Thing goes, I don't really believe in good or evil as just independent things that exist. They only exist in contrast to each other.
Yeah.
And Swamp Thing sort of proposes this idea of like there's two sides of a thing. We measure them by each other. So too can we do with light and dark, which again is not necessarily 100% true, but talks about this exact idea. And the great darkness and the light of heaven reach an accord. They like literally shake hands in that story, and the great darkness stops what it's doing, and it just goes, okay, we'll just make a little pact. We're just both part of this thing. And in Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths, it comes up again that the great darkness is not evil. It's not trying to destroy everything. It just wants to participate.
Yeah.
It just wants to be in it. It talks about like your stories are the only flicker I have or whatever.
Yeah.
It just wants to be in it. And actually in that story, it's actually the corruption of Pariah that is reflected into the Great Darkness, not the other way around. People think Pariah is being possessed by the Great Darkness. It's actually the opposite.
Yeah.
So there is this idea of the balance, light and the dark. Can one exist without the other? We measure one by the other. That is an idea in DC. When we take it down to the smaller level, though, of people with shadow powers, shadows, darkness, same thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And they manipulate darkness even in darkness.
Yes.
So, you know what I mean? If they're in a dark room, they don't go like, someone turn a light on so that then there will be a shadow that I can manipulate.
No.
It's just darkness.
Yeah.
They can manipulate that.
Yeah.
So,
Next question from Ghost with a Pen, who asks, why is Dr. Light so strong versus darkness? Or is it literally because of her light powers?
I mean, that's literally it, you know? And so we're talking about Dr. Light, Kimio Hoshi. She gains her powers in Crisis on Infinite Earths. The Monitor sends this beam of light to Earth, and it hits Kimio Hoshi, and she gets imbued with this ability to manipulate and project the electromagnetic spectrum, basically, you know, light.
Mm-hmm.
That comes in handy in a lot of different contexts. It could disrupt the light of Black Lantern light. It can repel shadow characters. It could do all sorts of things. The reason is because
Light beats dark. Yeah.
well, you know, and that thing of like, there's always a shadow or darkness somewhere, but you could also flood a room with light, and then there's not as much of it, or it's so little that it's not usable, or whatever however you want to phrase it. It's just the literal thing of her powers. She doesn't have well, it's slightly changed because she has more powers now, but it never really was a more metaphysical thing about like her positivity or her good. Her powers have slightly changed, and I'm not 100% solid on the new version of her, but she is extremely powerful.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Next question from It Shall Not Pass.
Oh, yeah. Constipated Gandalf.
That's correct.
Fuck yeah.
Who asks, are Shadow Thief's abilities based in magic, metahuman powers, or technology?
Well, it depends what era of Shadow Thief you're encountering.
Sure.
Generally speaking, he wears a thing called a dimensiometer. And it is a piece of technology that allows him to enter and exit shadows, manipulate shadows, essentially become a living shadow. So it's a piece of tech. Okay. So Shadow Thief is a Hawkman villain. His name is Carl Sands. He's just a guy, and he uses this shadow thing to be a thief. He's the Shadow Thief. But it can make him intangible. It makes him very hard to fight for Hawkman.
Totally.
The counter is that, like the nth metal can always disrupt some stuff, or whatever. And Shadow Thief has to make himself at least a little bit tangible to fight often.
Sure.
All those kind of things. But he is ultimately just a guy with tech. Now, at different times, he's had augmentations. So I mentioned Year of the Villain. That was where Lex went to everyone because he's trying to tip the scales towards Doom, away from Justice.
Yeah.
And he offers a bunch of sort of like tech upgrades to a bunch of villains. And so for Shadow Thief, he does that. He upgrades the Dimensiometer, his vest. And it makes Shadow Thief extremely powerful to the point where he's like outdoing the Shade, and Shade and Hawkman have to go to the Shadow Realm to fight him.
Yeah.
But that is still just tech.
Wow.
It's just that Lex like
Super
soups it
power.
up,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
But during Underworld Unleashed, where Neron, the demon, is making deals with all these heroes and villains, he's trying to buy up souls.
So he gets one of those too?
Carl Sands makes a deal to get actual shadow powers.
Okay.
And then he has actual powers for a bit. It gets reset after a certain amount of time. I can't remember precisely how, but he does have powers for a bit. Now, there's another Shadow Thief, briefly, in the New 52. Her name is Aviva Matula. And her shadow powers are because she finds, I think it's an alien skin that allows her and connects her to the shadow realm and gives her shadow abilities. I think it's an alien skin. I don't think it's a magic thing. So there's kind of three different things out there. There's like earthbound tech, there's like xenotechnology / biology, and then there's magic.
Yeah.
All of those three things at some point intersect and give you an ability to manipulate darkness of some kind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next question from Dante's Fire, who asks, I guess they have to give the heroes a fighting chance against someone with powers over darkness, because I've always wondered why someone with like Eclipso couldn't just materialize inside a person and burst out. As anyone who has ever had a colonoscopy can tell you, everyone is a little dark inside. Has Eclipso or any darkness user ever done that?
Right. I mean, it's a very good point.
Yes. It's all dark inside. Yeah.
It's a pretty, it's not like a big sun in the center of your stomach, like it's dark in there.
There's some holes, but they don't offer a lot of light.
No light shines there. It's a good point. I'm willing to bet you can find comic evidence of like a shadow character crawling out of someone's mouth or something. Like to be like, they can't get us here, and then it's like, kind of doing something like that.
Sure.
But it's never really used to its logical conclusion. But that's also like saying, how come Swamp Thing just doesn't stop everyone by like multiplying all the like micro
inside of
flora
your body,
in your body? Or how come, I don't know. There's all sorts of characters that have these.
That if you like could think about it more scientifically, you could probably.
Or just do this, like, or maybe they did it once. They're like, why don't you do that every time? Like, there's all sorts of shit like that. And the real answer is it's not as dramatic or entertaining or whatever. At a certain point, reality is just not as fun. But I think I would be surprised if there wasn't some version of something like that. They used one little bit of darkness, like in a mouth or an ear or something, to enter a room. But then they probably fight more traditionally. Like, you're right. Like, we're not just doing like Ant-Man and Thanos' ass kind of shit all the fucking time. You know what I mean? They could. You could make the argument it'd be easier or whatever. But I think the ultimate answer is just that's not entertaining. But it's a good point.
Totally.
There's darkness in all of us, physically
and emotionally.
Well, certainly. I'll just speak for the people in this room.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Next question from Mosaic Comics. They ask, Obsidian tends to only appear in stories with his more popular father and sister. What do you think could be done to help Todd come into his own as a solo hero?
I mean, first he just has to show up more. You know, like we went a long time without Todd, and then he's showed up again in this Infinite Frontier era.
Is that because he was in the Shadow Realm? Is that why?
No, it's because he was out of existence for a bit, like since the New 52.
Sure, yeah,
and that's the whole Dr. Manhattan manipulation and Doomsday
Sure,
Clock,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
He removed Alan Scott from existence, and it stopped the JSA from existing.
Sure.
And then it had all these knock-on effects.
Sure.
So as soon as that got corrected, all of those things sprang back, including Jade and Obsidian. We saw them a bit in Infinite Frontier. We saw him and Alan together a bit. Their relationship's a lot better now. That's great. That was fun. And then not a ton, though. You know, a few appearances, not a ton. But Obsidian has like a long arc, you know. It starts with being a hero starting Infinity Inc. with Jade. Infinity Inc. was a team of like JSA legacy heroes, like the kids of or the inheritors of JSA mantles.
Okay.
But Todd also has like a mental health thing. He had like schizophrenia or something like that, which then coupled with his darkness powers and the kind of fear element of that, coupled with the idea that the spirit of Ian Karkull was actually in the Shadow Realm, kind of like whispering to Todd, you know, like, and the idea that all these things are tangentially connected to the Great Darkness, which has all these kind of other kind of pieces to it. It drove him nuts, and he became a bad guy, and he had this whole arc. Like, he teamed up with Eclipso and Karkull and shit at one point, and he finally came around, became a hero again. But Obsidian has like a very big arc.
Wow.
A big, long arc through comics that happens through like the 90s and into the 2000s and stuff like that. He's an interesting character with a lot going on. It wouldn't take much to get him going again, but everyone wants a character to be big enough to stand totally on their own, like Flash or Wonder Woman or Batman or whatever. They all can't. But Obsidian can show up a lot more. Now, there's an Alan Scott series that's coming, but I'm not sure if that's meant to be more like his early days than him now. There's the current Justice Society book, which is, we're only like 5 or 6 issues in. It's a John's joint. It's fine, but we're not deep enough in to be like, are we getting lots of good character shit with all these different things? We're not there yet, so I don't know. There are opportunities, I think, for Todd to show up, and hopefully we take advantage of that, because Jenny had a lot more, like, she got to be over in Green Lantern. She got to have a relationship with Kyle Rayner. Like, we got to see Jenny in that and in all of the spots where we got to see Todd. There was more of her, But Todd's an interesting character, He's like a not super early, but a relatively early gay character. And, now the dynamic, too, with Alan being gay, finally coming out and being gay, is that Todd has the opportunity to, like, guide him.
Yeah.
Which is, like, it's such a good, interesting, constructive turn for their relationship. And I really liked what we saw in Infinite Frontier, so I'm hoping we get more of that. But I don't know if there's just one trick to making Obsidian work. And certainly the on his own thing is an interesting thing, because I do think a lot of it's pinned to his relationship to Alan and his relationship to his sister Jenny.
Sure. It would be challenging. Yeah.
The on his own thing is hard, especially because, like you said, there's a lot of other characters that do shadow things. So it's not really about the shadows.
Yeah.
It's got to be about just striking out on your own and his relationships and stuff like that.
Which then inherently makes you want to include them. Yeah.
But I don't always think that's like a bad thing. Like,
sure.
I don't know. There's probably someone that can crack it, but I also don't necessarily think it's a problem for him and Jenny to be like a unit. Not that every adventure has to be them together, but that, like, you kind of don't do an Obsidian story without checking in on Jade.
Sure.
You don't do Jade without periodically checking in on, like, I think, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think the reason we have that conversation, though, is that we were getting Jade stories where we weren't checking in on
Fair. And so he
On-
does need to be more.
Like he is the secondary
Yeah.
of the two. You know
Okay,
what I mean?
sure.
I think that's where that question comes from.
Fair.
I don't have a good plan or assessment of that because I think the problem right now is that what had been his arc is done. You know, having a sort of angry because he grew up in an adoptive home. He didn't know who his dad was. He found out it's Alan Scott. He kind of hated him. He went down a dark path. He was a bad guy. He got brought back. He has a good relationship with his sister. But now he gets those relationships. They get along. They're good. And I actually kind of think the biggest issue is like, so what's his deal?
Sure.
Not to be a stump about it, but like, what's his deal? And a lot of what had been his deal is done.
Yeah.
And so now you go,
What do we do with him?
the only thing we've got right now is like
his relationship.
keep
with his
going
family.
your relationship with your dad and helping him out in his kind of new lease on life.
Yeah.
But that's not enough to sustain a superhero thing. So you go like, so what does he do?
Sure.
Once you answer that question, I'm sure you can figure it out. But I think that's part of the problem, you know?
Yeah, that's fair. All right. Next question from Armory Comics, who asks, does Duke Thomas the Signal also have the ability to control darkness and shadow? If so, when did he unlock that ability?
Right. So Duke Thomas is he's the one that wears the yellow suit.
Yeah.
He was technically a Robin, but not under Batman. He was a Robin when the Robin thing was like a movement in the street, like a bunch of street kids were like putting on red and trying to keep their neighborhood safe and stuff like that.
Sure.
The We Are Robin thing. He was part of that. He saw his parents get like Neville Longbottomed during Endgame.
Yikes.
Like the Joker, like they got inhaled Joker gas and Batman couldn't stop them. So like they're alive, but they're crazy. So he saw that happen to his folks, and Batman took him in and trained him, but not as Robin, as more of a partner. And then in Dark Knight's Metal, we learn that there's some nth metal in him that gives him he makes him a meta. He has meta powers. And by the end of that, we learn that he has the ability he has some kind of like photokinetic abilities, light manipulation. Not like Dr. Light, which is like pew, pew,
Sure,
you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
But it's more like he has different kinds of vision. He has this thing called ghost vision where he can see like where light has been. So he can almost like his own detective mode kind of thing. He can kind of see the recent history of how light moved around a room. You know?
That's cool.
He could do that kind of thing. He could sense like different kinds of light radiation and stuff like that. He's got some different visions and things. And he does have some like light projection stuff, but it's more
Minor.
ambiguous and more minor for sure. And then in a series called... So he's the Signal, which, by the way, that's because he's Gotham's daytime protector.
Oh, fun.
So he wears the yellow outfit and stuff like that, and he is like daytime patrol in Gotham.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, which is like, you go like, it's a little like, I guess we know most of the crimes at night, so we should have 15 people patrolling them. But it's a little bit like, and you've got the day shift, right? It's like just him.
Yeah. Hello?
Hello? But that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But then during the run that he was part of, the Batman and the Outsiders, he goes up against Ra's al Ghul and some of his people, and one of them, I think the guy called Ishmael, some contact with him.
Don't call him that.
No. Well, no, that's like if you're flirting. I'm like, call me Ishmael. It's the first draft of Moby Dick. That wasn't part of the book. It was that he was like working on the manuscript. He wrote that. He passed it over. The guy was like, no, and left. He just took his manuscript, submitted it to the editor. They're like, call me Ishmael. Okay, I guess. Weird first line, but
That's so funny.
call me Ishmael.
Call me. Incredible.
Jesus.
Love a literary
But
joke.
when whatever something unlocks in him, and it actually unlocks that he also has some Umbra kinetic abilities. So not only does he have some perception and manipulation of light, he can do it with shadows too. So he's actually kind of manipulating like both the positive and the negative of what that is, right? the thing in the dark and the nothingness that is the dark. He can do a little bit of both, actually. So he does have both those powers, but they didn't unlock all at once. They unlocked kind of like in sequence. Like he didn't even know he was a meta. And then it was sort of revealed through Metal. And then in this other series, this other piece of it got revealed. If I'm being honest, his powers are extremely vague.
Sure.
But he does technically have a foot in each of darkness, shadow powers, and light powers.
Well, damn.
Which is kind of interesting.
Damn.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, let's leave Reddit and head on over to the doc score. Just a song, any song. Just one single song. Starting now. A song.
Just I got
One
fucking
you've
got
heard
to
today?
stop pushing me.
That's Shadow song.
Oh yeah. How does it go? All I remember is the in the shadows, but it's like that's three notes. That's like I can't summon the rest of the song. But
Okay.
I can't count that.
You didn't even say doc score.
No, Doc scored. Fuck. Shit.
It's not just sing a song. And let alone 3 words of one. In the doc score. There you go.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, sure you did.
That's what I meant.
All right.
Oh man.
First question.
Sure.
From Only Just Dan, who asks, does Shadow Lass share any connection to present-day Umber kinetics? Is she more powerful just by being in the future and knowing more about how shadows work in DC?
I don't think she's more powerful by being from the future and knowing more about how they work. That I don't think that really applies because she comes from a planet of shadow manipulators.
Oh, okay, sure. So if anything, that's what's more powerful, is that she comes from like a lineage.
Yeah, there's like she's like
There's a culture.
race of shadow people, basically. You know what I mean? And the name of that planet is Talok 8. Yeah, that's
Wow.
right.
Very impressive to pull that out of your brain like that.
I couldn't remember it. Yes, I had to fucking look it up. Fuck you. She has a bunch of shadow powers, though. Like, she can, like, manipulate shadows, conjure shadows. She can see in the dark. She can... all sorts of stuff. But, yeah, so Shadow Lass, she's part of the Legion of Superheroes. She's Talokian. She has those powers. Her connection, I think, to the modern age is that I am pretty sure that Lyssa Drak, the Sinestro Corps member and keeper of the Book of Sinestro,
Sure.
is from Talok. I think she is Talokian. I'm not 100% sure where her shadow power status sort of sits, but I'm pretty sure they're from the same planet. They've got the same, like, hair, skin kind of setup and everything. I'm pretty sure it comes up at some point, and I forgive me for not knowing when, but that's a sort of modern day connection. But it's very tenuous. It's not like Lyssa Drak has like there's no like, oh, and my best friend in the modern age is Obsidian because we have so much to talk about shadow wise. There's nothing like that.
Sure.
It's more just that she's from an alien world, and that alien world exists and keeps existing. You know, it's more that than anything. Although that is a good, relatively rare example of a planet that is featured in both.
Oh, okay.
I mean, not like we go to Talok a bunch in like modern era Green Lantern comics, but the fact that Lyssa Drak even exists, right? Like, so many of the planets, like, we only talk about them in one context or the other.
Sure.
Other than something like Earth, Oa.
Yeah.
You know, we don't talk a ton about Rimbor except in the future.
Yeah.
We don't talk a ton about, Thanagar except in the past.
Yeah.
Like they are kind of segmented, which it's 1,000 years apart. That's not great. Like, think of how many countries don't exist
Sure. Yeah.
now, right? So that's not the wildest thing ever, but that's also part of the reason why there's not like a ton of
It is
connection.
preposterous though, because I mean, like in 1,000 years, planets didn't exist suddenly.
Well, it's not about them popping into existence, but it's more like, does that culture still exist the same way? Is it still
Sure.
called that? Did they get wiped out in a war? Did they merge with a different culture? Are they called something else? Did
Sure.
their powers dissipate? Was there a natural disaster?
Sure,
Like, so many things could happen in 1,000 years, and you go, so that's why we're not talking about Tamaran, or like that's why we're not, like.
Seems like a pretty significant in 1,000 years.
Well,
yeah.
and the fact that it's so many planets,
Yeah,
but it's
yeah,
more
yeah.
just, you know what I mean? Like, it's.
I think we're gonna find out one day that there was like a big thing.
I mean, some of them we do, like there's no Green Lantern Corps when the Legion's around.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there's like we know some shit happened,
Yeah, yeah,
like.
yeah. It's like that thing with Star Trek Discovery.
Totally.
yeah.
Exactly. Although they make the deliberate point of being like, let's go to the worlds we remember.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
is a Vulcan. There
Yeah,
is an
yeah,
Earth.
yeah, yeah.
There is a,
Totally.
like we're
So
doing a lot of that on Discovery.
Sure.
But yes, it's the same kind of idea, basically.
All right. Next question. From the moral compass of the Doc Squad, they ask, you reckon there are any metaphors or allegories with respect to Obsidian's powers and his sexuality?
Probably.
Talk from a personal place.
Yeah, I mean, probably, but also probably not as many as.
Because was he
You'd
brought,
think.
like, was he in his inception a gay character, or?
I can't remember where in the trajectory that
Oh.
becomes part of the character.
Okay.
That's part of the issue here.
Because
But
it's like, if it was part of his inception, maybe, but
I think it's
otherwise they're ham-fisting
a
it
little
in,
bit
yeah.
later.
Not an allegory.
I think it gets like. I think when that becomes part of his character, there's lots of metaphors you could use about hiding yourself in shadow, retreating from the light of scrutiny, whatever. Like, I think once that's part of the character, you can use that power as a great metaphorical tool and use it, to good effect. But I think it gets messier if you apply it the other way around and you go like, well, obviously he was gay. Look at his powers.
Sure.
You go like, wait, well, hang on. You know what I mean? Like, if you do it that way, then you go like, well, that doesn't really that's.
Those dark ones.
Well, but we're talking about like, so it's bad, or it like
Yeah,
leans
yeah.
toward bad, or it's like a shame thing
Sure,
to hide. Like,
yeah,
so much of Obsidian's arc is about rejecting his father, going crazy, going bad, and then coming back. Like, I think it only kind of. Yeah, it's that thing where it's like anything. It's because it's a metaphor. There's no one way to use it,
Yeah.
But once the discovery is made that character is gay, shadows as a metaphor become very useful. And again, it's that idea of like, I had to fly under the radar, or I
Stuck
was
in the darkness.
or
yeah.
I would hit it even from myself, or
Yeah,
blah, blah. And
yeah,
of course you can even make things with like, just like I knew I was good all along and I was kidding myself to say that I was bad
Yeah,
or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
You could,
yeah.
I mean,
Yes,
that
I
gets a
hear
little-
I hear what you're saying.
it gets a little murkier, but like I think once we discover that about the character, there's lots
Being
of
true
ways
to
that you
yourself
can layer those
yeah,
things
yeah,
and then
yeah.
use them in like for like the allegory. But I think it would be a mistake to apply it the other way and say,
because
we got a character with shadow powers. It's perfect to make this character gay.
Yes.
Like, I don't think that's how it would work.
Sure,
You know
yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean?
Absolutely. All right, next question from Drago the Black Rose, who asks, who does the Shade typically go up against? I read a miniseries about him a few years ago. However, I can't find anything with him now. So any suggestions of what to read?
So, the Shade, Richard Swift.
Yeah.
Um.
Dick Swift.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's a fast dick.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Whoops.
He like I said, that's a character that goes all the way back to the 40s. He's originally a Flash villain. He fought
Okay.
Jay Garrick.
Mhm.
And that version might not have even been called Richard Swift. He was just like a generic thief with a cane that could make shadows.
Sure.
Obviously, retcons, and after Crisis, we kind of we have new histories for a lot of these characters.
I believe that maybe was a version of that character that we had used in a past episode before. The Kane and stuff.
Oh, probably
in a game, I think.
Yes, I'm sure that we did. Yeah, in his sort of current version, Richard Swift, he existed in the 19th century. In the early 19th century, he ends up in he gets kind of like conned or whatever by this guy named Simon Culp, who tries to kill him with this sort of sacrifice with like a lion's head kind of thing.
Okay.
Something goes wrong with what was happening, and Swift gets shadow powers. He becomes the Shade.
Okay.
Simon Culp eventually, they do this retcon kind of thing where Culp's spirit attaches itself to the Shade and exerts an influence on him that, quote, explains why he was a villain for so long. Because he kind of has this sort of anti-hero kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Where he's he protects Opal City, which is where he lived, which is Starman's town. So he also went up against Starman as well, but he's mostly a Flash villain. But he'll protect that city and stuff like that, or he'll help. He's usually you can count on him to be on the side of the angels. If you watch the Stargirl TV show, they capture that idea of him very well, which is like, yes, I was a villain, but that's boring now. Like that idea of like if you live long enough, you go like, what's good and bad,
Sure.
like, which I think is interesting. He's extremely powerful, Lord of Shadows sort of thing. As far as what to read, definitely that James Robinson Starman. He's big in that. He had a series that came out of that. I think it's 12 issues. If you were talking about modern things, in the Rebirth era, in the Flash run, Josh Williamson's Flash run, there is a Shade story, a Shade arc
nice.
in there. That is in there. There's also a Shade small couple of issue story in Hawkman during Year of the Villain, so right before Death Metal. Shade's in there.
Nice.
You can find Shade in other. It came up in a different question, I think. He's in the Wally West Flash run. Like he'll crop up every once in a while in Flash because, again, historically, he's a Flash villain. He'll crop up in things like JSA or like any kind of Justice Society thing because, again, he's sort of a Golden Age villain. He's part of the Injustice Society. He's implicated in all of that. He's in there. I'm positive he's in the Eclipso Darkness Within event. He must be part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, those are kind of starting points to read, but definitely I'd say read Starman. I mean, also just read Starman because that's a good series and I'll never stop telling people to read it. But The Shade is an excellent part of it. Like, and you get to read his diary and you kind of go into like his history and it's so like atmospheric. You get that kind of like the like turn of the century fog kind of like
nice.
It's just cool shit. Like it's definitely worth reading. That's probably the best Shade stuff is that and then the series that spun out of that.
Love that.
Yeah.
All right, last question from JK who asks, does Raven's soul self connect to Shadows in any way?
Oh, interesting. So Raven is the daughter of Trigon.
Yep.
So she's half demon.
Mm-hmm.
And she's raised in Azarath. And a lot of her powers are like empathic. They're like feelings based.
Mm-hmm.
But she's an extremely powerful sorcerer, just magic user in general. Her soul self is basically like her astral form.
Mm-hmm. It does show up in like the TV show. I know is like a shadow kind of thing.
A lot of the like visual interpretations of Raven's magical powers are as darkness, shadow, or things that look like shadow at least.
Yeah.
Like maybe they're not
Teen
shadow
Titans
at all.
Go show up
maybe
that
they're
way.
just like pieces of physical magic, but they're always like black. It's not like it's not crazy to go. Maybe there's some kind of connection there. Is there a formal connection to Shadow? I don't think so. but is she a powerful enough sorcerer to
manipulate shadow?
like Zatanna can manipulate shadows if she says the right. But you know what I mean? Like, there's just like how you could have magnetism powers, but you could also use magic to make magnets.
Totally.
You could have shadow powers, or you could use magic to fuck with shadows.
Sure.
There's two,
but there is no,
especially because shadows are magic-y powers to begin with. So I'm gonna say not technically,
sure,
but because Raven is such a powerful sorcerer, I guarantee she's made darkness to cover an escape, or that, like if something manifests and it looks like a shadow, or like,
totally.
She's a powerful enough sorcerer. She could do whatever the fuck she wants with a shadow.
Yeah.
But it's not that she has shadow powers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that was the last question.
All right.
If you have a question for next week's episode.
Oh, you know what? We actually have to settle this.
Oh, all right.
So next week's episode, voted on by the Golden Age patrons, and they fucked it up.
Wow, what a surprise.
It's a 3-way tie right now.
Love a 3-way.
So the themes, I basically said for this month, because it's October, I wanted it to be something villainy.
Okay.
So I gave them either the main villain of each one of the 7 Justice Leaguers, or in the case of a couple of them that have had their own episodes, just a different villain. So the full 7 were Lex Luthor, Joker, Cheetah, Grodd, Atrocitus, Ocean Master, and Despero.
Okay.
The 3 that are tied for first are Grodd, Atrocitus, and Despero.
Okay.
So we gotta figure out a way to settle this.
Atrocitus?
Oh, sure. Let's do Atrocitus.
Cool.
Yeah, we did it.
Yeah, send in your question for Atrocitus.
There you go. We're talking about Atrocitus, leader of the Red Lantern Corps.
Welcome to the
Blood Mage of Yzmolt.
Welcome to the system of how we selected comic books when we bought that whole thing.
Yeah.
You want it? All right.
Yep, sure. Yep. I do like building it up like we have some sort of fair system.
No.
Yeah.
You want to do that?
I don't know. You should vote more weighted next time.
Yeah, so ask your questions about Atrocitus.
That's right.
Next week, you can reach out to us through our various social media platforms.
That's right. Dr. DC podcast on the platforms.
That's right. Also, 208-917-3238.
208-917-DCEU if you're nasty. That's the doc phone, baby.
drdcpodcast.com or .ca.
That's right. Or just send us an email, drdcpodcast@gmail.com.
That's correct. Also give us a 5-star review and we will read it on a future episode. And if you want even more content, why don't you subscribe to our Patreon?
Patreon.com/DrDC. There's a $1, $5, $7 level. They all give you access to the Doc Scored in the shadows of
still not the Doc
our
Scored
amazing community on Discord. You meet a bunch of fun people, talk shit about all sorts of different stuff. Not even DC, just movies, TV, books, all sorts of fun times. And at the higher levels, you get weekly bonus episodes like the Double Dose. Right now, it's still Doctober for the Double Dose.
That's correct.
And at the highest level, there's whole other podcasts. There's rewatch series like Toretto Talks, or currently Bonding Time. We're going through every episode of every James Bond movie, rather. My wife and I are going through and watching all of
And you're
those.
having a great time doing it.
I mean, we actually are.
Yeah, except for the part where you have to do the actual recording, but
that was just because I was tired and we had watched Rubber.
Yes.
Which, by the way, maybe the best movie I've ever seen.
Subscribe to find out all of his deep thoughts about Rubber.
My God. Yeah, I hate them usually.
Yeah.
But this one was okay.
This one felt pretty good.
Yeah. I guess maybe sometimes that's fine.
Yeah. When it's forced on you.
Whoa. No. When there's a group of us and we're all doing it. Let's be clear.
That's fair. That's the safe way to go about it.
Yeah.
Also, there's a party going on the CW network.
Okay. Keep going. You're doing good.
That party is called Supernatural, and we have a
Yeah.
whole podcast discussing it.
Yeah, it's a party. It's over there.
Yeah.
But you keep going. You're doing good.
We're on here
Yeah.
recording Dr. DC, but over there,
Right.
there's a whole other podcast called
On the
Ghostfacers.
CW, there's a podcast.
Well, that's what the TV show is. Sort of fell apart when I made it at.
Keep going. You're doing great.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I appreciate that. But if you want to be part of that party, you want to talk about
the
it.
one that's over at the CW.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, on the lot.
There's
a podcast on the lot.
It's more of like a metaphysical.
It's live only.
Location.
We stand on a soapbox.
It's like a metaphysical location.
Yeah. It's in the sphere of the gods.
Yeah. Yeah. If you want to enter the sphere of the supernatural, you can do so through. I gotta talk to these fucking dorks in a way that they think.
Yeah. And you're doing a great job.
Well, yeah, obviously. The number one podcast in Canada. Yeah.
Yeah. That was what we won.
Yep. Ghostfacers is a supernatural rewatch podcast where we go through every single episode of the CW's Supernatural.
That's right, baby. We talk about real world monster lore, behind the scenes stuff about the show. We're partway into season 8 right now.
We have a lot of scientific experts who call in and let us know about all of the real world lore in the scientific world.
Unlike the Dr. DC listenership, there's a lot of very learned folks over on Ghostfacers.
Doctors and scientists and engineers.
The people that the government would save if a comet was coming.
And the Dr. DC fans are what produces after the comet hits.
Yeah. What's left behind after the rapture. That's us over here.
That's right.
Yeah.
So listen to Ghostfacers, and that is it for this week.
Adios.
Ciao, ciao.
Heroes, they always fight for what is right. Live with danger and adventure, they are men of might.
This was a Brain Freeze podcast.